My mother told everyone I was infertile to explain why I wasn't having kids, so I announced my pregnancy at her birthday party. So I'd been with my boyfriend Alex for about 3 years when we finally got our own place last January. My mom Rachel was constantly asking when we were giving her grandkids, like every phone call, every family dinner, every time she saw us holding hands or just being happy together. It was honestly getting really annoying. But then something weird happened. She just stopped asking completely. Like overnight, the baby questions disappeared. I thought maybe she finally got the hint that we wanted to wait until we were more settled financially and emotionally ready for kids. Well, turns out, she'd been telling my entire extended family a completely different story. My cousin Emma mentioned it first at my aunt's barbecue in March. She pulled me aside by the potato salad table and said she was sorry to hear about my fertility issues, and that if I ever needed someone to talk to, she was there for me. I was completely confused and asked what she meant. That's when she told me my mom had been spreading the word that Alex and I had been trying for over a year, but couldn't get pregnant due to some medical problems I apparently had. She said my mom seemed really upset about it, and asked everyone to not bring up babies around me because it was a sensitive topic that made me cry. I was absolutely furious. I called my mom that same night and confronted her about it. She tried to play it off like she was protecting me from annoying questions, but I knew she was just embarrassed that her youngest daughter wasn't following her perfect timeline. She'd had my sister Katie at 23 and me at 25, so in her mind, I was already behind schedule at 26. The worst part was that Alex and I had actually been trying for about 2 months at that point, but we wanted to keep it private until we had news to share. Every time someone at family gatherings would quickly change the subject when kids came up, or give me these pitying looks, I felt sick knowing they all thought I was broken somehow. Then in May, I found out I was pregnant. 5 weeks along, due date in January. Alex and I were over the moon, but I was also plotting my revenge on my mom's lies. I decided to wait until her 55th birthday party in June to make my announcement, when all the relatives who thought I was infertile would be there. The party was at my uncle's house. About 30 people crammed into his backyard around folding tables and lawn chairs. My mom was wearing this bright pink dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion, holding court in the center of everything, talking about her new yoga classes and showing off photos from her recent trip to Florida. When it came time to give speeches, I stood up with my wine glass full of sparkling apple juice. I started off normal, talking about how my mom always taught me to be honest, and how family communication was so important to her. People were nodding along, expecting some sweet birthday message. Then I said, that's why I know she'll be so happy to hear that Alex and I are expecting our first baby in January. We found out last month, and since mom's been so concerned about our fertility struggles, I wanted to share the good news with everyone here tonight. The silence was deafening. My mom's face went completely white, then bright red. My Aunt Linda actually dropped her plate of cake. My cousin Emma's mouth was hanging open. Everyone was looking between me and my mom, trying to figure out what was happening. My mom tried to recover by forcing this huge fake smile and saying how excited she was, but you could tell she was dying inside. The rest of the party was incredibly awkward, with people coming up to congratulate me while giving my mom confused looks.
My sister-in-law blew up at me because my Chinese mother-in-law gave me her jade bracelet instead of her. I'm white, married to David for 3 years. His mom, Lynn, is 67, speaks broken English around most people, and holds traditional Chinese values close to her heart. When I first met her 4 years ago, she looked me up and down and said, too pale, too thin, before walking away. David warned me she'd be hard to win over. My sister-in-law, Kelly, married David's younger brother, Mark, 2 years before I came into the picture. She's an aerospace engineer, makes 6 figures, and never lets me forget it. At every family dinner, she finds a way to mention my wasted education or how I'm setting women back by staying home. I have POTS and autism that make traditional work difficult, but Kelly doesn't care about explanations. I started taking Mandarin classes 8 months ago at the community college. It's hard, but I practice every day. Lynn's accent is thick, and I wanted to understand her better. The first time I responded to her in Mandarin, her eyes went wide. She didn't smile, but she nodded. Every Sunday at 10 a.m., I go to Lynn's house to help fold dumplings. The first time she invited me, I thought it was just chores, but when she brought out the dumpling skins and filling, I realized it meant something more. In Chinese culture, folding dumplings together is intimate. It's reserved for family. We fold in silence mostly, but sometimes Lynn tells me stories about growing up in Guangdong province. She's blunt, calls me Little Box because of my red hair and small frame, but she says it with affection now. Last month, she taught me her secret chili oil recipe, the one she brought from China 40 years ago. She made me write it down 3 times to get it perfect. Kelly's tried everything to get Lynn's approval. She bought expensive tea sets, brought fancy desserts to family dinners, offered to pay for home renovations, but Lynn just nods politely and sets the gifts aside. From Lynn's perspective, Kelly talks too much, interrupts elders, and treats family dinners like networking events. Yesterday was the monthly family dinner at Lynn's house. I arrived early like always to help cook. Kelly showed up exactly on time with Mark, carrying another expensive gift, some imported Chinese liquor. Lynn thanked her and put it with the others, unopened. After dinner, Lynn pulled me into her bedroom. My heart was pounding because she's never done that before. She opened her jewelry box, the carved wooden one she keeps on her dresser. Inside was the jade bracelet, the one I've seen on her wrist every single day since I met her. In Mandarin, she said, "My mother gave this to me when I married. Now I give it to you." Her hands were shaking as she slipped it onto my wrist. The jade was warm from being in the box. I started crying immediately, ugly crying, and Lynn patted my shoulder awkwardly. We walked back to the dining room. The bracelet caught the light. Kelly saw it instantly. I watched her face go white and bright red. She stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Is that Lynn's bracelet?" Her voice was shaking. I nodded. Kelly turned to Lynn, switched to broken Mandarin she'd clearly practiced. "Why her? Why not me?" Lynn responded in English, calm and clear. "Because she earns it." Kelly's voice got louder. "I'm the one with a career. I'm the successful one. She doesn't even work." People at the table went quiet. David reached for my hand under the table. Lynn's response was ice cold. She stood up, looked Kelly directly in the eyes. "You work for money and titles. She works for family. You buy expensive gifts I don't need. She learns my language so we can talk. You come on time. She comes early to cook. You want respect? You must give respect first." Kelly's face crumpled. She grabbed her purse, said, "This is insane," and stormed toward the door. Mark followed her, apologizing to everyone. As they left, Mark turned and pointed at me. "This isn't over." 20 minutes later, David's phone buzzed. It was a long text from Mark saying I manipulated his mother and alienated Kelly, and that David needed to control his wife better. David showed the text to Lynn immediately. Her expression hardened. She asked for Mark's number, typed it into her phone. I could see her jaw clenching. This morning, I showed up for our usual Sunday dumpling folding. Lynn was already at the kitchen table with her phone out. When I sat down, she put the phone on speaker and called Kelly. Kelly answered with, "What?" Lynn's voice was different. The accent was gone. She spoke perfect, crisp English. "Kelly, you sent your husband to insult insult my daughter-in-law in my home. You disrespected her, you disrespected my son, you disrespected me. I almost dropped the dumpling skin I was holding. Kelly stammered. Wait, you speak? Lynn cut her off. I speak perfect English when I choose to. I was born in San Francisco. My accent is a choice. Do you know why I use it around you? Because you never cared enough to listen past it. The line went quiet. Lynn continued, voice steady. You want my bracelet? Learn to fold dumplings first. Learn to cook. Learn that family is built with time, not money. When you understand that, call me back. In Mandarin. Kelly hung up. Lynn looked at me, switched back to Mandarin with her thick accent, and winked. Now little fox, I teach you soup dumplings. Turns out she speaks perfect English when she needs to. She just never needed to for. My sister kept telling everyone at family gatherings that my baby wasn't my husband's child as a hilarious joke. She went pale when I made her remember her funny crime. When our daughter Nora was born, she had the brightest blue eyes. Neither my husband Wesley nor I have blue eyes, but my mother did, and so did Wesley's father. And the pediatrician said it was completely normal, that it happens when both parents quietly carry the recessive gene. Everyone understood this except my sister Vivian. At Nora's first family gathering when she was 3 weeks old, Vivian took one look at her and said, "Well, we know what happened here," and winked at everyone. "Blue eyes don't come from nowhere," she said. "Maybe I had some explaining to do." My mom told her to stop. Vivian said she was just joking. Couldn't anyone take a joke anymore? But she didn't stop. At my nephew's birthday, she asked Wesley if he wanted a paternity test for Christmas. At the 4th of July barbecue, she asked me in front of 15 relatives if I wanted to confess anything. Each time she'd laugh and say she was kidding. And each time I watched it get a little deeper into Wesley. His mother started asking if he was sure. His brother pointed out that Nora didn't have his chin. One night I caught Wesley looking up DNA testing websites. He said he was just curious about ancestry stuff. At Thanksgiving, Vivian brought a DNA kit as a gift, wrapped in baby paper with a card that said, "For when you're ready for the truth," and announced to the whole table what it was. Wesley walked out and left me there with our baby and 20 relatives staring. I found him in the car, crying, saying we should just do the test to shut everyone up. I told him if he needed a test after 4 years and a planned pregnancy, we had bigger problems than Vivian. She wasn't making jokes anymore. She was running a campaign, spacing the cruelty out so that just when things felt calm, another post or comment would land. She posted pictures of blue-eyed actors captioned Nora's real daddy. She started a group chat with female relatives, writing that I'd been distant around a certain coworker when I'd actually been on bed rest the last 2 months of the pregnancy. She said it so confidently that relatives started agreeing. My cousin told me Vivian was placing bets on when Wesley would leave me. My mom kept telling me to rise above it, so I stayed quiet, and every time I did, I could feel a little more of my marriage getting eaten away. The breaking point came at Nora's first birthday party. We'd made it clear Vivian wasn't welcome. She showed up anyway, and when Nora opened her gift in front of everyone, it was a onesie with a big question mark where the word daddy should have been, and underneath still waiting on results. The room went silent. Wesley stood up, took Nora, and walked to our bedroom, and I heard the door lock. Vivian was laughing, saying we needed to lighten up. It was a gag gift. That's when I lost it. I told her she was a miserable woman who destroyed relationships for entertainment, that her 2 divorces made sense now, that even her own kids barely spoke to her. She said if my marriage was that weak, it deserved to be destroyed. My mom tried to step in, but I wasn't done. I announced to the whole room everything she'd done for a year. The rumors, the betting pool, making my husband so paranoid he was looking at DNA tests. This wasn't humor, I said. It was cruelty. Vivian tried to leave. I followed her to the door, and I told her that if she ever contacted us again, ever made another joke, ever mentioned my daughter's eyes, I'd tell everyone what she did to Dad while he was dying. Her face went white. She tried to force out that same high laugh she always made, except it came out shaky and wrong, and her voice cracked when she said I was being dramatic. So I followed her onto the porch, and I spoke loud enough that everyone inside could hear me through the open door. I said we could discuss Dad's missing $38,000 right here in front of everyone, if that's what she wanted. I asked how she'd explain Dad's signature appearing on checks during his last 6 months of hospice, when his hands shook so badly he couldn't hold a fork. I told her I had copies of every forged check, and the fake life insurance form that moved everything to her 3 weeks before he died, locked in my safe. She turned and ran to her car, dropping her keys twice before she got the door open, and her tires squealed out of the driveway. Then I walked back inside, where my entire family was waiting, and my mother was standing right behind me with a look that told me the part I'd kept secret for 2 years was about to become everyone's business. Click here to watch part 2 of the story. My sister kept telling everyone at family gatherings that my baby wasn't my husband's child as a hilarious joke. She went pale when I made her remember her funny crime. When our daughter Nora was born, she had the brightest blue eyes. Neither my husband Wesley nor I have blue eyes, but my mother did, and so did Wesley's father. And the pediatrician said it was completely normal, that it happens when both parents quietly carry the recessive gene. Everyone understood this except my sister Vivian. At Nora's first family gathering when she was 3 weeks old, Vivian took one look at her and said, "Well, we know what happened here," and winked at everyone. "Blue eyes don't come from nowhere," she said. Maybe I had some explaining to do. My mom told her to stop. Vivian said she was just joking. Couldn't anyone take a joke anymore? But she didn't stop. At my nephew's birthday, she asked Wesley if he wanted a paternity test for Christmas. At the 4th of July barbecue, she asked me in front of 15 relatives if I wanted to confess anything. Each time she'd laugh and say she was kidding, and each time I watched it get a little deeper into Wesley. His mother started asking if he was sure. His brother pointed out that Nora didn't have his chin. One night I caught Wesley looking up DNA testing websites. He said he was just curious about ancestry stuff. At Thanksgiving, Vivian brought a DNA kit as a gift, wrapped in baby paper with a card that said, "For when you're ready for the truth," and announced to the whole table what it was. Wesley walked out and left me there with our baby and 20 relatives staring. I found him in the car, crying, saying we should just do the test to shut everyone up. I told him if he needed a test after 4 years and a planned pregnancy, we had bigger problems than Vivian. She wasn't making jokes anymore. She was running a campaign, spacing the cruelty out so that just when things felt calm, another post or comment would land. She posted pictures of blue-eyed actors captioned Nora's real daddy. She started a group chat with female relatives, writing that I'd been distant around a certain coworker when I'd actually been on bed rest the last 2 months of the pregnancy. She said it so confidently that relatives started agreeing. My cousin told me Vivian was placing bets on when Wesley would leave me. My mom kept telling me to rise above it, so I stayed quiet, and every time I did, I could feel a little more of my marriage getting eaten away. The breaking point came at Nora's first birthday party. We'd made it clear Vivian wasn't welcome. She showed up anyway, and when Nora opened her gift in front of everyone, it was a onesie with a big question mark where the word daddy should have been, and underneath still waiting on results. The room went silent. Wesley stood up, took Nora, and walked to our bedroom, and I heard the door lock. Vivian was laughing, saying we needed to lighten up. It was a gag gift. That's when I lost it. I told her she was a miserable woman who destroyed relationships for entertainment, that her 2 divorces made sense now, that even her own kids barely spoke to her. She said if my marriage was that weak, it deserved to be destroyed. My mom tried to step in, but I wasn't done. I announced to the whole room everything she'd done for a year. The rumors, the betting pool, making my husband so paranoid he was looking at DNA tests. This wasn't humor, I said. It was cruelty. Vivian tried to leave. I followed her to the door, and I told her that if she ever contacted us again, ever made another joke, ever mentioned my daughter's eyes, I'd tell everyone what she did to Dad while he was dying. Her face went white. She tried to force out that same high laugh she always made, except it came out shaky and wrong, and her voice cracked when she said I was being dramatic. So I followed her onto the porch, and I spoke loud enough that everyone inside could hear me through the open door. I said we could discuss Dad's missing $38,000 right here in front of everyone, if that's what she wanted. I asked how she'd explain Dad's signature appearing on checks during his last 6 months of hospice, when his hands shook so badly he couldn't hold a fork. I told her I had copies of every forged check, and the fake life insurance form that moved everything to her 3 weeks before he died, locked in my safe. She turned and ran to her car, dropping her keys twice before she got the door open, and her tires squealed out of the driveway. Then I walked back inside, where my entire family was waiting, and my mother was standing right behind me with a look that told me the part I'd kept secret for 2 years was about to become everyone's business. Click here to watch part 2 of the story. My sister told my parents she was pregnant with my boyfriend's baby, and they demanded he marry her, but her lie collapsed in 3 minutes when he showed up with his mother. My sister Nadine told my parents she was pregnant with my boyfriend's baby on a Tuesday night during dinner. She didn't call ahead. She sat down at the table, waited until Dad finished saying grace, and said, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant, and the father is Joseph. Joseph had been my boyfriend for 3 years. We had been talking about moving in together. Nadine knew all of this because I told her everything. She was my sister, and I trusted her. When Nadine said Joseph's name, my mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Dad put both hands flat on the table. Nobody looked at me. Not once. Mom turned to Nadine and said, how far along are you? Nadine said 3 months. Mom said, have you been to a doctor? Nadine said yes. Dad said, does Joseph know? Nadine said he knows, and he's been ignoring it. That was a lie. Joseph had no idea Nadine was saying any of this because nothing had ever happened between them. They had met maybe 4 times total, always at family dinners, always with me sitting right next to Joseph. I said that's not true. Dad held up his hand and said, let your sister talk. Nadine started crying. She said Joseph came on to her at a barbecue last summer, and one thing led to another, and she didn't know how to tell me. There was no barbecue last summer. Joseph and I spent last summer visiting his mother in New Mexico. We were gone for 6 weeks, but my parents didn't know that because they never asked about my life. They only ever asked about Nadine. The next morning, my father called Joseph. He didn't ask questions. He told Joseph he needed to come to the house on Saturday and do the right thing. Joseph called me confused and said, your dad just told me I need to marry your sister. I told him what Nadine said. Joseph went quiet for a long time and then said, I'm coming Saturday, and I'm bringing my mother. Saturday came. My parents had the living room set up like a courtroom. Dad in his recliner, Mom on the couch next to Nadine, who was wearing a loose dress and had her hand on her stomach the whole time. She wasn't showing anything because there was nothing to show, but she kept rubbing her belly and talking about morning sickness. Joseph walked in with his mother Alma. Alma was a retired home health aide who spent 30 years taking care of pregnant women. She carried a large canvas bag that she set down by her feet. Dad started immediately. He said, Joseph, we raised our daughters right, and when a man gets a woman pregnant, he steps up. Joseph said, sir, I have never been alone with Nadine. Not once. Not ever. Dad said, don't sit here and lie to my face. Nadine started crying again. Mom said, Joseph, you should be ashamed of yourself. This girl is carrying your child, and you won't even acknowledge her. Joseph said, I spent last summer in Las Cruces with my mother. We were there from June through July. Nadine said the barbecue was in August. Joseph said there was no barbecue in August either. I was working double shifts at the warehouse the whole month. My supervisor can confirm every single day. Nadine wiped her eyes and said, well, maybe it wasn't a barbecue exactly. Dad said it doesn't matter when it happened. What matters is the baby. That is when Alma spoke up for the first time. She said, Nadine, sweetheart, how far along did you say you were? Nadine said 3 months. Alma said, and who is your doctor? Nadine said she didn't want to share that information. Alma nodded and said, I understand, but since we're all here, why don't we just settle it right now? She reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a sealed pregnancy test still in the box. She set it on the coffee table in front of everyone. She said, this takes 3 minutes. If you're pregnant, we'll all know for sure and we can have a real conversation about what comes next. I watched my sister's face change. It went from teary and helpless to something stiff and guarded. Mom said she doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Alma said with all respect, ma'am, your daughter is asking my son to give up his life and marry her based on a claim of pregnancy. A 3-minute test seems fair before we start planning a wedding, don't you think? Dad said this is ridiculous. Alma said what's ridiculous is asking a young man to marry a woman he has never touched based on nothing but her word. Nadine said I already took a test at home and it was positive. Alma said wonderful. Then this one will be positive too. 3 minutes. Nobody moved. Joseph sat with his arms crossed.
My wife's family tradition is going to ruin our son's life. My wife was 8 months pregnant when her mother showed up at our house with a lawyer and a stack of documents, trying to legally force us to name our unborn son Judas. I'd known it was coming. My wife's family had a tradition where the firstborn son in every generation, for the past 400 years, was named Judas. They had a family tree framed in their dining room with every Judas on it going back to the 1600s. My wife, Nora, was a second child and a daughter, so she got to be named Nora, basically winning the lottery. Her older brother got stuck with Judas and now goes by Jude, which isn't much better, but at least people don't immediately assume his parents hated him. When Nora got pregnant, her family was thrilled the tradition could continue, since Jude only had daughters. At the announcement dinner, her father stood up with champagne and said, "To baby Judas," and I laughed. because obviously it was a joke. Nobody else was laughing. That night I told Nora there was no way we were naming our son Judas. She agreed immediately. She said she'd always hated the tradition and thought it was cruel to saddle a kid with that name in modern times where everyone just hears the word traitor. We decided we'd name him Theo and deal with her parents being upset. We thought that would be the end of it. We were so wrong. Her family started a full pressure campaign, showing up every single day with new reasons we had to use the name. They sent boxes of baby clothes monogrammed with Judas. They ordered a custom crib with Judas carved into the headboard. They redid their guest room and painted Judas's room on the door. Her father told me he'd already added our son to the family trust, and legally it had to be Judas to qualify for the inheritance. Her grandfather, another Judas, flew in from Florida to personally guilt trip us. They held a family meeting where everyone explained how we'd be destroying 400 years of tradition. Even Jude showed up and said, "Look, it sucked for me, but you get used to it. It's part of who we are." I pointed out that he literally goes by a different name, and he said that was beside the point. Nora started to crack. After weeks of it, she started saying things like, maybe we could use it as a middle name, or what if we spelled it differently? Then her parents started dangling money. They'd pay for college. They'd give us a down payment on a bigger house, but only if we used the name. Nora started looking at houses online and taking daily calls with her parents in another room, coming out stressed and refusing to say what they'd talked about. When Nora was 8.5 months pregnant, her parents showed up with the lawyer. They wanted us to sign a legally binding agreement to name the baby Judas in exchange for $200,000 and a guaranteed inheritance. If we didn't sign, we'd be cut out of the will and cut off from the family. Nora looked at the papers, and I could see her actually considering it. I stood up and told them to get out of my house. After they left, we had the biggest fight of our marriage. She said $200,000 would change our lives. I said our son's happiness was more important than money. She said the name wasn't that bad. I said most parents don't deliberately choose to make their kid a target. We didn't speak for 2 days. Then her water broke 3 weeks early. She called me at work screaming that the contractions were already close together and she couldn't reach anyone else. I told her to call an ambulance, that I'd meet her at the hospital, and I ran to my car and drove across town as fast as I could. I never made it. A truck ran a red light 2 blocks from the hospital and hit my side of the car so hard the whole world went white. I don't remember the ambulance or the first surgery. The last thing I remember is gripping the steering wheel, thinking I had to get to Nora. When I woke up 12 hours later, my leg was in a cast, my ribs were taped, and Nora was sitting next to the bed holding our son. She was crying. She handed me the birth certificate and whispered, "I'm so sorry." The name on it was Judas. I stared at the official state seal, the printed letters, his name typed in the box where it should have said Theodore. Nora's words came tumbling out. How the doctors told her I might not make it. How her parents were in the waiting room the whole time she was delivering, telling her it was what I would have wanted, and she was so scared she just signed everything they put in front of her. They'd been in the waiting room with the paperwork ready, which meant that while I was on an operating table 2 blocks away, they hadn't been praying I'd live. They'd been waiting for the one moment I couldn't say no. Click here to watch part 2 of the story.
What was the best birthday gift you've ever received? For my 16th birthday, I thought I already knew exactly what my gift was going to be. My parents had finally agreed to let me throw my first real backyard birthday party. No little kid decorations, no family barbecue, just my classmates, music, food, and a movie projected onto a giant screen outside. I spent almost a month planning everything. I made custom invitations, picked out a playlist, rented string lights, and even convinced my dad to borrow a projector from one of his coworkers. My mom helped bake cupcakes that matched my favorite colors, and my younger brother complained the entire time because I kept making him test the decorations. The only thing my parents asked was that I invite our new neighbor. A girl named Claire had moved in a few weeks earlier. She was quiet, always reading on her front porch, and hardly talked to anyone. I rolled my eyes. My friends don't know her. My mom crossed her arms. Then this is the perfect chance. I argued for almost 10 minutes before giving up and walking next door with an invitation. Claire smiled so brightly that I almost felt guilty for not wanting her there. Almost. The day of the party finally arrived. Everything looked perfect. The lights came on just before sunset. The projector worked. The food smelled amazing. I even put together little gift bags for everyone. Then I waited 5 minutes, 10, 20, no one. I checked my phone. Nothing. I refreshed my messages. Still nothing. Eventually someone posted a story online. Every single person I invited was at another girl's birthday party across town. Someone had decided to schedule theirs on the exact same evening. Apparently everyone chose hers. No one even bothered telling me. I just stood there staring at the screen while my stomach dropped. My parents pretended everything was fine, but I could tell they felt awful. I told them I wasn't hungry anymore and went inside before they could see me crying. A few minutes later, my mom knocked on my bedroom door. "Claire's here." I wiped my face and forced a smile before going outside. She was standing there holding the tiniest gift bag I'd ever seen. "I know I'm probably early," she said nervously. Then she looked around. "Or maybe really late." I laughed through my tears. "They're not coming." Her face completely fell. She quietly handed me the little bag. Inside was a handmade bracelet with tiny silver stars. "I make these when I'm nervous," she explained. "I thought maybe you'd like one." It honestly meant more than any expensive gift could have. I thanked her and figured we'd eat a cupcake before she headed home. Instead, she pulled out her phone. "Can I make one call?" About 30 minutes later, cars started pulling into our driveway. Not teenagers, adults. Claire's older sister had heard what happened. She brought her coworkers from the animal rescue where she volunteered. Then 2 neighbors showed up carrying board games. Another family brought homemade cookies. Someone else arrived with speakers. One guy unfolded a grill from the back of his truck like this. Had been planned for weeks. Within an hour, our backyard was full. People I barely knew were introducing themselves, telling funny stories, teaching card games, and treating me like we'd all been friends forever. One woman even taught us how to decorate cupcakes professionally. Another neighbor challenged everyone to a ridiculous water balloon contest that somehow ended with my dad getting completely soaked. For the first time all day, I forgot I'd been abandoned. We stayed outside until almost midnight watching an old comedy movie while everyone shared blankets and popcorn. Before leaving, every single person signed the back of my birthday banner with little messages. One wrote, "Never measure your worth by who didn't show up." I still have that banner folded in my closet. The best part came on Monday. The classmates who skipped my party suddenly wanted to apologize. They claimed they thought I had canceled. Funny, because none of them had asked. One girl saw pictures on my phone. "Wait, who are all those people?" I smiled. "My birthday guests." She looked confused. "Those are adults." "Yeah, it actually looks really fun." It was. She asked if I was having another party anytime soon. I shrugged. "Maybe. Can I come?" I smiled politely. "I think I'll keep the guest list a little smaller this time." She didn't know what to say after that. Looking back, the bracelet Claire made probably cost less than $5, but it came with something priceless.